Superclusters is where we demystify the secrets, stories, and tactics behind the money that moves the venture capital world.
There is no one in venture, in the startup world, who does not know who this individual is. And you probably already know who I'm talking about if you've clicked on this episode. There's also no investor that I know of that has not cited at least one of Peter's graphs and Carta's insights. And for many of the viewers and listeners on this podcast, Peter is someone who needs no introduction. Nevertheless, to set the stage, my good friend Peter Walker is the head of insights at Carta, an end-to-end suite of products for the private markets. You've probably already seen him across his primary channels of distribution on LinkedIn and Twitter, or X, whatever floats your boat, as well as his own podcast, The Data Minute, which I've been lucky enough to be invited on as well. As part of this holiday series to feature some of the best and brightest minds in the venture ecosystem, Peter was and is one of the first people that I went to. This is not your usual Peter episode. This is also not about his Carta's story, nor is it really a data episode. This is an episode about Peter himself, what got him here, the things you might not have known about one of the startup world's most recognizable celebrities. We do also talk about in this wide-ranging conversation how he chooses which events to go to, as well as how certain investors, what they say on stage and off stage are completely different, and what exactly happens in closed-door conversations. So, I feel like in my mind, I know when I asked you this, you're like, I'm game. But in my mind, this has been a long time in the making because I'm like, if I am going to invite Peter on, it can't be episode 1 because he's going to look down on me if I invite him for episode 1, season 1. And I've kind of spent the last, give or take, at this time, like total 6 seasons preparing for this moment. And now I finally have you, and I'm nervous, and I'm on stage, and I might suffer from stage fright, but nevertheless, I'm excited to have you, and thank you for joining.
That is an altogether ridiculous opening statement. I assume you're not actually nervous about this, but David, it's really a pleasure to join you. I am a longtime listener, first-time caller, as it were.
You know, we've had many offline conversations about thematically podcast content, and so much of how much Superclusters has grown is a function of our conversations as well. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, appreciate it, man. Yeah, you are one of my favorite minds around venture. And that is, there are quite a few minds engaged in this industry nowadays and quite a few content producers on it as well. So I think you've carved yourself quite a niche.
I will be sure to pay you your $20 after this episode.
There you go. Check.
Thank you.
Got it done early. Yeah.
Product placement done on my own episode. I love it. Okay, so let's start things off. So there's a quote I stumbled across fairly recently that I really, really like, which is, we romanticize the stars, but often forget the dark is what made them visible. And so for you, I'm curious for you, you have hundreds of thousands of followers across social media. You lead insights at one of the most celebrated institutions at the startup ecosystem. Hell, if we go back in time, your first interaction with entrepreneurship was back in college with a couple of friends. Many would relish to be in the position you are today, Peter, to have the set of experiences in which you have today. But from those looking from afar, what were some of the most formative, potentially darkest moments that others would underappreciate that led you here today?
Whew. Well, to be honest, my first brush with entrepreneurship as a participant in it was certainly, that time in college. But as a spectator, far, far, far before watching my dad build a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those were interesting times, some really great moments, some very, very down moments. And I remember being, probably 6 or 7, and he was in his business was in shipping and packaging. So there was this kind of like large warehouse in Denver where we were growing up, where we would go and like help out sometimes on the weekends or sit there and play with bubble wrap as a bunch of kids. I'm one of 7 children, by the way, so I have a lot of siblings. It was all incredibly hectic and stressful and felt like a war zone. But then, the kind of thing where it's type 2 fun and you look back on it and you go, wow, a big family is such a blessing and it's amazing. But yeah, there were certainly periods in there where it got much darker. And then in my own journey, it was not as though starting a startup or being in this career path was somehow this end goal that I had been working towards steadily for many years. it just kind of happened in a very strange and roundabout way. And I think what it impressed on me the most is just how path dependent some of these life choices are. You went to an event, you didn't go to an event. You met the right person, you said the right thing. It feels so fleeting, but it really does. Some of those things actually change your life. And the problem is you don't know which ones are going to do so. So there's been like a big up and down thing to get here where, Cardi has given me this amazing platform over the last couple of years.
What was that roundabout way? Can you remember some of the seminal moments that led you to where you are today, or just your first chapter of entrepreneurship that obviously you couldn't have planned for, but by, one might say, increasing surface area for serendipity to stick, you just happened to be at the right time at the right place?
The first time I thought about building a company was in college with a couple friends. And we went into company building for entirely the wrong reasons, which was we all hated what we had done the prior summer. We just loathed it. I worked at a hedge fund for a summer as a summer intern and just got the crap kicked out of me every day, not literally, but verbally. And like just loathed it, like had no fun at all. And then I had a couple friends who were feeling kind of the same thing where it was like, this was horrendous. So we chose what we assumed would be the furthest path away from that, which was we're going to start our own company around music festivals. And so the idea was we're going to be like a pitchfork for music festivals. It was not very well thought out, but we're going to fund it through merchandising. So we're going to build relationships with all of these festival companies and then go and merchandise at these shows, make money, and then build like a website and an app and things afterwards. We thought that was going to be super easy. We were like, oh, we're so smart. Look at us. We're avoiding spreadsheets and we're just going to go get to be at music festivals all summer. And like, we're just geniuses. Whereas in reality, it turned out to be the hardest I've ever worked. Like you're sleeping in Walmart parking lots in a rented U-Haul Suburban full of, rave merchandising stuff for legitimately weeks and weeks on end. And so that was a wild time. We were paying sales tax in 26 states. We had built something that was actually, if we had just done the merchandising, probably a pretty decent business, but that's not what we wanted to do. We were in it to be music journalists almost. And so it was just this weird mix of like this thing that I had done basically on a lark to avoid another thing that I probably should be doing. And then it turning out to be harder than the first thing, but also very exciting at the same time. So it was a great example of the weird mix of stuff. And then as we were coming up to our end of our senior year, we ended up like quasi giving the business / selling it a little bit to other college kids. And then of course, college kids did what you would expect them to do with a music festival business, which is they killed it immediately. Like, just right in the ground.
They did a case study on it and then they killed it.
Yeah. And then we had to pay some people back who gave us some initial capital and stuff. And that was rough. So there was a whole host of like weird roundabout decisions that got in there. But all the while, right after that, I just kind of canceled my interviews with the big consulting firms that I was going to do after school and stuff. And it was like, I need to go someplace tiny. I need to go someplace where it's like a group of people that can all fit in the same room and you just make decisions with those group of people. Because that to me was the bug that I got out of that experience.
I think most people who would have gone through such an experience like you did probably would have almost reverted completely back. They're like, actually, I thought hedge funds were bad, but after this horrendous, and these are my words, not your words, experience building a business and sleeping out of U-Hauls, like, actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was, and the pay's all right. Why?
The pay's all right, for sure. I was never super attracted to the hedge fund part of it. It did very much feel as though, and I sort of feel this way a little bit about all investing, which is it is the intellectually most gripping exercise. You get to go and learn about a new industry and discover a new business model and like understand a mental part of the world that you live in through investing. And then you get to make bets, sort of, kind of, whatever you want to call them. And then you get to see whether or not you were right. And that's a little bit of a drug. You get to like, oh, I had an idea about the world and then that idea came true. What it lacks is the agency part.
Yeah.
which is the part that I wanted from the startup, it was when I joined the startup out of school, Public Relay, I think I was employee number 10 or 11. And so literally, if one of the 11 of us didn't do it, it wasn't getting done.
Yeah.
And then and this business might close. So that level of responsibility, I think, is what it is its own sort of endorphin high. And it's a different kind of thing than the intellectual mapping that you get as like deciding whether or not to make an investment.
In my head, sometimes I think about the dichotomy as the person who likes building Legos versus the person who likes seeing the Lego sculpture sit in the glass case.
Yeah.
And there is joy in both, right? Like there are different kinds of people who enjoy different kinds of things. Some people love to see it on display. Some people, they go through the art. And like I had a conversation actually with, I don't know if we ended up including in the episode, but I think we did, with Nikki Sugarman, who used to be at a multifamily office based in London, and then now helping with Mount Side's kind of accelerator program out there, where he loves building Lego cars. I don't want to take this too far on the deep end here, but one of the things he really enjoys, or we talk about, like, and we'd like to do at some point, collectively so, not that I have that many Lego Technic cars, but then have you seen those like Instagram posts where they hang it on the wall and they have like a nice picture frame around those Legos?
Yeah.
And people spend tons of time figuring out what the right color balance, the design of the poster that like the Lego car hangs on. Some people enjoy doing that. Some people just enjoy building it. And I think it's the dichotomy of like investor versus like operating and or founding a business.
Yeah. There's also a season of life kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is you talk about a topical thing that is just kind of overwhelming these days in San Francisco. All the noise about 996 and like, oh my God, are these either people being taken away advantage of by ruthless and cruel founders, and or this is the only way to build, and if you're not doing this, you're an idiot. And it's like, no, actually, sometimes you're that person and sometimes you're not. Like, again, right out of school, I joined this company. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to go drive an hour out into the suburbs outside of DC to go work at this place, and I'm home at like 10, 11 sometimes, and I am loving it. I am living for it. And guess what? Yeah, after 2.5 years, I was burnt out on it. And I needed like to either reduce the way that I was working or figure out a new system. But that like both of those things were right for the moment. Because it was just like, no, I'm actually just super jazzed on this thing. And I'm going to like, that's what's getting me up. I'm waking up thinking about this idea, this business, this whatever. So I love that. I think it's silly when people are like mandating it somehow or trying to not make it. I think the COO of Linear said this, Christina, I believe her name is, she was like, this is a compulsion, not a commitment. Yeah. If you're compelled to do it, it feels great.
Yeah.
But if it's a forced commitment from you, then obviously there could be problems.
It's like the pull and push of product market fit, right? Like product market fit is when you feel the market feels it's pulling out of your hands, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way, I don't know what this would be like, talent role fit, so to speak. And if the role feels like it's pulling you in, or you're being compelled, in Christina's words, which I actually love that terminology, if you're being pulled in, then that's the right thing for you. Like you wake up and you're excited. Monday is super exciting for you. And you wish that every day was a Monday morning instead of a Saturday night. Versus if you're at an organization where you feel like you're looking forward towards the weekend and everything feels like a, let's say, Sunday night, you're like, oh, you're dreading Monday, so to speak. It's probably not the right place. In the 996 like mandate, so to speak, is not going to run well with you.
And I think that there's at least when I talk to my friends who are in tech these days, startups, big tech, wherever, there's a growing recognition that sense of compulsion it very rarely lasts for 10 years. It's not something that can be extended in most cases, unless occasionally you're founding a company. Although when you talk to founders in private, sometimes not for them either. That it's very rare to find one set of problems that can get you so excited for your entire life in that same way. And oftentimes people need to go and have a moment where they're working to work and then they're working to like learn and experience joy again. And you're just kind of figuring out where you are in that that timeline, that continuum. And then the AI thing is just the AI thing. It's just the next version of, oh wow, you either have to do A or B or else you're an idiot. Like we love painting things in that sort of dichotomy for no real reason.
I don't know if this is a good analogy. So Peter and audience, feel free to psychoanalyze this, which is when you're in grade school, it's different from saying like, oh, I only love math. I will only do math for the rest of my like, K through 12 career, versus saying like, I really enjoy learning. And there's different classes that spike me in different ways. And every year that I go from biology to chemistry to physics, like, yeah, like I might wane in my chemistry interest, but I still love the act of learning. That's why I enjoy showing up to school. This is also speaking from nerdy David mode, but nevertheless, like it's less so I liked a particular subject, but I like the act of asking questions and then finding answers you don't expect. And actually, one of my friends had a really great definition of curiosity recently, which I've since quoted. So Matt, if you're listening to this is your definition of curiosity, which is curiosity is the art of asking questions where you're not married to the answer.
It's like presupposing your ability to not have a next thing to say, right? You're not asking so that you can sound smart.
Exactly. And I will be honest, there are investors in our world, whether they say this publicly or privately, but they've admitted this before, which is when they say, tell me about your competitors, or tell me about your financial modeling, or tell me about your portfolio construction model, they actually have an idea of what they'd like to hear. They're less open-minded about what the answer you could say. There's either like you matched, it's a true and false test. It's either you matched or you didn't match. It's a 0 and 1 binary test. But I think just in the world of like, there's so many ways to make money, there are different ways to be right. And in foresight, just because of how long our asset class is, no one really knows. It's just us superimposing our lived experiences as quote unquote advice and frameworks.
I've been starting to, you and I were talking a little bit before we turned the camera on about, how to keep things fresh when you speak in public.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been doing lately when I go and talk to groups of people, usually founders, but, investors, LPs, whoever, is I have this big slide at the start of all my data. Because when we present stuff, I'm a very data-driven person. I always have new numbers to present and they feel authoritative because they're in a pretty chart. And so, of course, everyone's like, well, that looks good. It must be true. And it's like, actually, and this is me saying this, you should probably, if you're a founder, for instance, selectively ignore at least half of what I'm saying, right? Because it doesn't apply to you.
Right.
And the job and your job as a founder, your job as an investor, your job as a thoughtful person is to figure out which half.
Yeah.
And no one can tell you and which half is going to be useful. And then you layer in the additional complication of immediately after me, these founders are going to go and listen to somebody else, and this next person is going to give them directly conflicting advice.
Yeah.
In many cases.
That's true.
So then you're left with, okay, make up your mind or choose path number 3 and do it for yourself, right? And it's so funny in startups where we kind of like play around at knowing a lot of things that really nobody knows. And it's kind of just like, we hope that these things are true. Even when you have a gigantic data set, like this stuff is so uncertain.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to make, proclamations about truth.
I will say this is true for any data set out there. Any number that we've come across, there's no way we could have sampled 8 billion people in this world. And even in the startup world, like there's no way we can sample every single individual. And so we're left with a lot of A, survivorship bias, B, availability bias, which is okay. I mean, maybe if you have a large enough of a data set, you can capture what the market, like the overall market may look like. But it's actually a really great quote. And actually, I keep attributing this quote to this person, but I've actually never heard his name pronounced live. And I probably should have done my homework beforehand. But Ronald Coase, or like Coase. That's Coase, right? Coase.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to go with it.
We're going to go with it. And viewers, feel free to fact check
and
us.
Apologies up front if that's wrong.
Yes, apologies up front. But he's an economist, and he has a really great line that I absolutely love, which is, if you torture the data long enough, it'll eventually confess anything to you.
Mm.
And
yeah, I like that.
there's a lot of that, right? Like there is, for every proof point, for every opinion out there, there is a set of data that will prove you to be right, even if you are the minority of opinions out there. I think in the world of, first of all, Peter, I think you're doing such a great service to the world, but I've seen so many folks, whether it's your data or AngelList or kind of like PitchBook or Preqin or like Stepstone, the list goes on, where they cite your data and they say, Carta tells me I'm top quartile. Carta tells me I'm top decile. I must be good. And there's so much a reliance on, like, first of all, you know this, right? The last 2 to 4 years, let's say, of data, it's sparse. Like in terms of what true returns could look like, just because people, like, the feedback loop is so long. People go back to market on average 12 to 18 months later. And I'm sure with your data, like, that might change with certain AI companies and all that. Some people are going back to market in less than 12 months and all that. But on average, that's I think grander market expectation. If that's the truth, like 2 to 4 years later, you've had a reconfirmation of the market like 1 to 2 times after the initial culling, so to speak. But all that to say, they're like, I am good now. And that's why you should trust me. I'm now, quote unquote, established based on metrics, or they give up the vibe that they're established based on metrics. Anyways, for you, how do you balance the clarity of the null hypothesis against the chaos of trillions of confounding variables that could influence causation as opposed to just correlation? Or said another way, where do you draw the line in terms of data-driven decisions versus data-informed decisions?
I mean, if you're being statistically pedantic about it, then everything that you do would be data-informed, not data-driven specifically. However, I think, so 2 points. One, longitudinally, you're completely correct, right? Not only is 5 years basically not enough data to go on, it might be 8. It's not, you don't really know yet. And on the company side, I've always felt this with early stage investors. It's one of the debates I've had with a lot of them about, like, the model that many people go with is in some ways psychologically comforting, because it states concentration and, like, your ability are these deciding factors. And because those are the things in which you have the most, quote unquote, influence, you feel as though you're making an impact. Whereas, on the whole, I think the data is at least fairly reasonably argued that is completely incorrect. And you should be far less trusting of yourself, far less trusting of your own beliefs and opinions than most, especially emerging managers, have to be, because they're betting on crazy outliers. But that applies to founders, that applies to employees, that applies to everyone, which is you're making decisions in an incomplete vacuum. What I think many people should do more of in terms of those mental models is frame it in the reverse. Like, which of these decisions am I going to make that is the most, like, regret minimizing, that I have the least likelihood of regretting later on in life, assuming that in most cases I'm going to be wrong. And if you look at it from that way, you probably are going to be slightly more risk-taking than you are. And you're probably going to make slightly less conventional decisions. On the whole, I think that this is not true for everyone. But I think in general, especially if you're talking about, like, the group of startup people, like, regret minimization as a framework versus purely the idea of, like, oh, I need to follow the power law, or I need to do X, Y, or Z mantras that we've been taught. I think that's a useful way, like, talk about what you're going to feel over the next 10 years, because who knows if you're going to be right. We can check back in, a decade and a half at this point.
I love the regret minimization framework in a lot of ways. How do you apply that in your own life? Like, when you're making these decisions, like, when's the last time you've applied the regret minimization framework?
I mean, you can apply it to minor things. I think one of the best examples of me applying this framework where I got it wrong was, again, I was at that company right after school, and I had sort of been there for a while. I'd been there for 5 years or so, and I had an opportunity to leave, and I didn't take it. And I gave myself a whole lot of reasons, blah, 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 blah. But what I actually was thinking was, well, I'm a big fish in a small pond here. Like I have all these institutional connections here at this company. We had grown from, we'd grown to about 120, 130 people. It was, we were doing well. We were never going to be like a unicorn, et cetera. It was just an interesting company that was doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But I was making decisions based on inertia. I was like, this is comfortable and I'm good at it. And like people respect me here and blah, 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 blah. And I should have done the exact opposite. I should have just taken the next thing and gone. Because when I ended up doing that, it was, you just learn so much more, like putting yourself into a new context. So like, I think job changes are a very obvious one where regret minimization is an interesting framework. But even as something as simple as all the travel that I'm doing now is like, okay, you're kind of exhausted and you feel like you've been doing the same thing for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. But what if the person that you need to increase the surface area of your luck is at this conference and they're there? And I know that they're there and I want to meet them and impress them and, et cetera, et cetera. Like you just got to say yes to those kinds of things. It oftentimes is a nice way to push yourself through like, oh, wow, what am I feeling in the day to day?
So many events going on. Obviously, it's different if you're speaking at it. And Peter, for the most part, you are speaking at these. But let's assume that you're a participant in many of these events and you get invited to tons of events to participate in as a guest. How do you choose which ones to go to? And this is actually, I'm scratching my own itch here because we now live in a moment where there are tech weeks left and right. There's a conference that seems to be happening every single week of the year, minus outside of like 2 or 3 months.
100%.
If we fully encapsulated that, I'm going to get off my soapbox in just a sec, but if we fully encapsulate that, like technically regret minimization would be you go to every single one.
Right. Correct. It has become a pretty annoying problem. And it's not just annoying for the people who are maybe speaking at these events or investors. I think it's in particular annoying for founders. And then again, you get that thing that we do in venture, which is so annoying, which is there's a phenomenon that happens, which is like founders going to conferences to network, to meet employees, investors, whoever. And then there's the meta phenomenon, which is people talking about founders going to networking events and blah, blah, blah on X. And it's always X. And it's like, and then there's two camps, which is like, go to everything because, your next great person will be there. And then there's the camp that's like, if I see a founder in an event, I'm never investing in them. They're never going to make it because they're not, working hard enough. They're not building. It's such a waste of time. And so it's a perfect illustration of how venture takes like a pretty normal human problem, which is how do I use my time well, and builds two silly camps. And then those two silly camps like argue with each other as though there's a right answer when clearly the right answer is like, do you? It like depends on who you are and what you're building. When I'm making a framework about events to attend, the two things that I'm looking for are one, who specifically am I there to meet? And then is this a net new relationship or am I like keeping a current relationship warm? That's the first and foremost thing. And then the second one, obviously obligations to make sure that I'm talking to the right audiences for Carta, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know about you. Over the last year, I think I've gotten more value out of events with 15 or less people than those with 500 or more.
I am in complete accordance there. I have a bias towards smaller events because you have more meaningful relationships and conversations. Because the truth is, if you go to a larger event, let's say there's 1,000 people at the event, you're talking to, I don't know, from a conservative point, like 2 to 3 people. From an optimistic perspective, like 20 people. But the 20 people you do talk with and exchange business cards and LinkedIn's with, like you're not really getting to know them. You'll always try to find an excuse for a coffee chat after, but they don't know you well enough to make a decision whether they want to have that coffee chat or not either. And so if you're optimizing for like the 2 to 3 people you'll meet at a large event, why not just do it at a smaller one? And
yeah, it is interesting. I think there's a class to be taught, and I would certainly take it, of how to maximize your time within a conference in the right ways that both build one-to-one relationships, which is basically why you're there, and also like somehow maximize learning opportunities or whatever you think. I don't know about you. I have come to sour slightly on much of the conference content. For instance, I think panels are generally really hard to do well. everyone is the best of intentions, but I think in general, panels as an actual content type are far worse than big talks or fireside chats. But I don't think that I think there should be also net new things that people are doing. I haven't seen very many net new content types at conferences. And I hope that we kind of break that mold a little bit because it is getting rather stale for people who've been to a number of them.
I 100% agree. I also think the more people that is supposed to speak on a stage with a given duration of time, the less depth you'll cover. And where the real learning comes from is the depth. So if you have a panel of 3 people, which is usually the average, maybe 2 people, during a 30-minute chunk, minus you asking questions and them introducing themselves, which let's get the pleasantries out of the way at the beginning and the end, they're really chatting for about 10 minutes each, optimistically speaking, realistically like 7 to 8 minutes. And the question is, like, can you really go deep if they only have stage time to talk for 7 to 8 minutes? And more often than not, unlike a TED Talk or unlike a talk where there are presentation slides and decks and all that, where they actually prepare to deliver hopefully insightful content, for most fireside chats and panels, it's always like the cop out of like, oh, you don't have to prepare for this. We'll just ask you whatever questions. So even if you have A players on stage, which is my assumption here, they don't always bring their A game, which is a dangerous thing. And then you, for better or for worse, you take a picture, you rub shoulders with impressive people, but you don't really learn anything. And if the purpose is to learn something, panels aren't necessarily the best. But speaking of, I wouldn't call it an innovative like format, but one thing a friend and I recently tried, we did it on a virtual setting just because we had people all over the world kind of tuning into this, but we found a lot of interest, and whether you count NPS or not, just like enthusiasm for a debate format. You have 2 polarizing opinions on a given topic, and you have them go at it with against each other and actually be confrontational. Because I think most discussions on stage, people seem to talk past each other.
Yeah. But here's the thing: the incentive structure is to talk past one another.
Yeah.
So it's the way the thing is set up, because ostensibly this person was invited on stage because they are well known enough to have an opinion that matters to some segment of the audience, and so they want to get their opinion out on the thing, as opposed to engaging net with the person who just made a statement. And it's tough. So like in some ways, I think the actual structure of the conference itself gives us kind of mediocre content occasionally. You know, live podcasts, I think, are an interesting content type that could definitely be more explored. And then just there's some like set of energy that needs to be brought up. Maybe it's that you're just like flash, like you need TBPN, but on a conference stage instead. Like there's something to be done where you're like making it way more lively than this thing that everyone is kind of half looking at their phone at, you know?
Right. There needs to be interaction. Well, not needs to be, but preferably there's interaction with the audience, which is also going full circle here, at least to the events format. Why sub 15, sub 10 people, dinners, happy hours, get-togethers are so meaningful because everyone is a participant in the conversation. There's no speaker versus like just listener. Everyone is a speaker and listener at the same time.
Man, if there's I do think that I've been on a bit of a speaking tour this year, and next year we're going to do a little bit less of that.
Okay.
And some of that is
my chances of inviting Peter to speak on stage.
No, but David, for you, anything. I just name the spot. I'm there. But it's also interesting. I think you do get a better mix. You would probably feel this as well. Speaking to one audience group as a whole is not nearly as fun as speaking to 2 or 3 audience groups in the same place. So like founders versus founders and investors versus investors and LPs.
Yeah.
Where people, especially in those smaller ones, where people can like give the actual other side of the table's perspective, I think is really valuable and can be much more fun.
Oh, yeah. One of the things this is one of the events in which we hosted a while back, but we found a lot of fun. We had a fireside chat where someone would give their opinions, and we had, I believe, 3 different audience types in the audience. We had founders, investors, and LPs, and we gave everyone kind of a like and dislike button, so to speak, and they had like paddles.
Ooh.
And for things they agreed with, there would be like a like like everyone raised their like green like button, and then for everything you disagree, you'd raise like a red dislike button. And then there was like in the moment, like as people were speaking on stage, and then so it's like, oh, like we see like a sea of green, but like 2 red. Let's call on them to ask like, why'd you pick red, and have live feedback during the talk itself, which we thought was really fun. And there are certain topics that are very like controversial in nature, so you'll have different types of audiences. Like it'd be like a mix of green and red.
Yeah, that's funny because it means that the people who are speaking need to be like not fully thin-skinned. They're like just faced with a sea of red, and they're like, no, I didn't mean it that way or whatever. But that's exciting. That's more fun.
But it's like when people backpedal and they describe the nuance of their initial comment, that also allows for more learning.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this gets into the other topic we had been talking about a little bit before, which is the tendency for people in our industry to say different things to different audiences.
Yeah.
Slightly different things in public. And it's almost never, I believe X when they're on stage, and then they get off stage and they're like, anyone who believes X is an idiot. Like, it's never that cut and dried. It's just the shades in between it where, they're giving slightly platitudes on stage, and then off stage, they're like, actually, this is how the world actually works.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of that going on right now. I think some of that is just venture getting professionalized, and there's just so many more people in the space and all that kind of stuff. But it does make me a little sad. It makes me slightly sad.
What are examples? Because you and I, we have these backroom conversations with folks. And I more so you, just because so many folks come your way because you have so many opinions, data, and commentary that exists in the public space.
Yeah.
What are the kinds of platitudes that people say, but in private rooms, they tell you something different? You don't have to name any names, but what are some of the topics that have incongruency?
The first one that comes to mind is this really weird incongruency between a emerging manager who spends a lot of time online talking down the mega fund strategy and saying, not only is this kind of like not venture and sort of implied wrong somehow, but also the LPs who are funding it are not the smartest. Like, there's just an inherent way that you talk about where it's like, if you were smart LPs and you wanted outperformance, you would do X. And yet, those managers would like to raise bigger funds. Basically all of them would like to one day be a mega fund.
Yes.
If you really deeply believe that, then the natural consequence of it should be that you want to keep your fund sizes small forever, right? Isn't that what you would say? But that's usually not what I hear. And it's so like little things like that, where it's like you kind of are advocating for the place. You're talking your own book from where you sit in the market. But if conditions were different, you would be talking the other book.
Yeah.
It makes the people for whom that's not true stand out a little bit more.
I think it's a lot of, at least in conversation, what are the choices they have available to them? If there is a choice that, let's say I'm just pulling hypotheticals at this point. If it was like Barack Obama who wanted to raise a fund, like I am reasonably confident he would have no trouble raising a reasonable sizable fund. I mean, Obama's not the best kind of example here, but maybe there's someone else who is well known in the industry who has a choice. They could go down the mega fund route, and they willingly choose not to go that route, versus someone who never had the opportunity in the beginning to go the mega fund route, and then preaches a story where mega funds don't work out. And I think it's if you have that choice and you like consciously chose not to do that, there's something interesting there. But if you never had the option, it's like, I'll be honest, I've never worked in a big company before, right? And I do not have the right to ever say working in a big company sucks. Yeah, like I've just never I've never seen the other side. If I've never eaten durian before, I cannot say durian is the most horrible fruit out there in the world, although my girlfriend's going to kill me if I ever say that. But I can't say that. It's only after I've tried it, or at least had the choice to try it, that I can have an opinion like that.
Yeah, that is fair. And obviously the phrase talking your own book, I feel like I use it pejoratively sometimes, but it also is sort of a fact of life. Like you're speaking from the perspective in which you sit because how could you do otherwise in most cases? And it's not necessarily that you're doing that from a bad point of view. It's just this is who you are and this is the kind of things you believe in or the life that you've had and the position that you're in currently. I do think that there are things about venture that are effectively resolve themselves as tragedy of the commons, where if everyone was acting in the quote unquote best interest of venture as an asset class, we might have different outcomes, but individual incentive structures do not align that way. And therefore we have perhaps not an ideal state within venture today. And that's just sort of the world as it is. And it's not, it's really hard to see how that would change. I'm thinking specifically of the mega fund emerging fund thing, but you could point this out with, founders taking rounds from top tier firms or valuation discussions amongst emerging managers versus non-emerging managers, or like the way that people hate on VC sometimes because VCs have like some public record of bad behavior. It's all kind of a tragedy of the commons feeling to me, and that's really hard to get rid of.
Peter, you and I, naturally, in all our conversations, we've gone on for a lot of tangents, and I feel like we can go on many more. But in the interest of time, I'd like to round the corner with a couple things. 2 promises to the audience. 1, we'd love to spend some time of just like things people may not know about you. And I'll have a couple questions queued up for that. It's called perspective questions that inform Peter's thinking. And then second of which, I believe you came, it is the holidays special. So you did come with a certain set of gifts, which we'll talk about at the very end as well. But to take a step back from all of this, I'm curious for you, from someone who is best known for the data and charts that you shared through Carta's data, to someone who's led the COVID tracking project for The Atlantic, to playing under the tutelage of Coach Artie Smith, who also now happens to be a Tableau ambassador for data visualization. What was your earliest relationship with visualizing data?
Oh, wow. You quoting some of my high school stats. That's hardcore, David. I love the research. Oof. When was the first time that I encountered data viz in particular, which is my sort of hobby hole and within the whole data world? It's the thing that I like geek out on the most. I had a book in high school. I read Edward Tufte's books in high school about visualizing and presenting information. They are, gotta be honest, very dry books. Wouldn't say he's the best writer, but he is a legend in data viz. Like everyone who's ever been big at building charts and graphs has read Tufte and like respects him so much. And I'm the same way. So that was maybe the first interest in it. But I gotta be honest, it wasn't, I'd studied history and political science and like did a little economics in college. I was not some math forward person. And then right after school, as I joined that startup, the product was effectively charts and graphs. It was an analytics product. So you spend a ton of time on the dashboard page and all this kind of stuff. And so as I got better at the work, part of that was getting better at data viz. And I just like fell into a hole of it. I did it all the time. I read books about it. I learned like D3JS. There's a lot of things that go into that. But
what is D3JS for those who are unfamiliar with it?
It's just the JavaScript library that's about charts and graphs. So there's a lot of different ways to build charts and graphs online. You can build them in spreadsheets, all that kind of stuff. But it really, it was a very cool for me moment of, oh, this is what people mean when they say you get like obsessed by a little tiny niche of something. Like I was obsessed about building charts, which is not the coolest of hobbies, but it definitely stood me in good stead over time.
I feel like every time you mention something, I have more questions, but I'm going to refrain from asking additional follow-up questions, at least for this set of questions. But going back to grade school days, as a proud Sun Devil who once was the All-State first team selection, who scored 14 goals and 8 assists in a single season, why would you say soccer is an underrated sport in America?
Wow. Back in the day, I was a huge soccer player. I think the problem with soccer in America is sort of twofold. One, it's just the obvious problem, which is in other countries, there's not nearly as much competition from other sports. So like this was not the first one that took hold. Our best athletes, quote unquote, typically don't play soccer, or not nearly as many of them. The second is in the structure of things. So the US is a gigantic place with many, many, many different youth organizations that all structure into soccer, and they all ladder into different ways, and they all have different incentives. Whereas if you're in Spain, for instance, like the academy structure makes that so much easier to produce. It is designed to produce great players at the national team level, not designed to have those young kids like win as many games as they're growing up as possible, which is basically what the club system in the US is designed to do. So we prioritize like bigger, faster, stronger athletes at the expense sometimes of skill-based, generation of talent that way. And that's like the big difference. But I love soccer. I want it to be bigger in the States. Maybe the World Cup will change things. I don't know if you're going to go. I'm definitely going to try to go. That'll be amazing.
I will try. That's the key operating word here. If I can get in, that's a different story.
Like 94 was evidently this, I was 4 years old at that time. That was an explosion moment for soccer in the States having the World Cup here. So hopefully this is like another opportunity for that to be the case.
One last question before we go into the gifts. As a concerned roommate who helped put together an intervention for your roommate, Matt, to go on the Atkins diet in college, what are some of the great lengths you've gone for friends over the years?
We did not force Matt onto the Atkins diet. That would be very rude. That was all. What are some great lengths I've gone to friends? I feel like my friends have gone to greater lengths for me, honestly, in some ways. But I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like one of the best things about being, early 30s or so is that when you were in your 20s, you saw people when you could, but a lot of times that was weddings and, big get-togethers, and everyone scattered after school. So you were, all your best friends are in different places, and you kind of proximity is this like crucial thing. But now in the early 30s, you've got like a growing friend group in the place in which you live. And then it kind of makes it easier to like plug your old friends times. And so I've been really grateful to a couple old friends from school who like reignited friendships with me later on after, a few years out of school, and then connected me to people that I'm now incredibly close with in San Francisco. So like, I think that one of the best things that you can do for your friends is introduce them to your other friends in different groups.
It's funny that you mentioned this. I literally just did that. So one of my really close middle school friends just moved to Philly and went to Philly with a fairly small group of folks. So didn't know that many folks there. So I was like, hey, you know what? Let me introduce you to the folks that I know in Philly. And to my knowledge now, they're actually hanging out a lot. So
there you go.
I don't know if they I hope they become long-term friends. But so far, they're good indicators.
They owe you a friendship, which is a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. I love that.
I love the idea of friends owing me things. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm
fair
kidding.
enough. That's also great. Yeah.
Okay. I put this at bay for long enough. It is the holidays. Peter Claus is here and is coming down the chimney bearing gifts. Things, and I've asked you, at least before this conversation, things that you and your team have never shared publicly before that would lead to serious introspection to some of our listeners as well as yourself. So what are some of those things? And the only lead-in you gave me which is a great lead-in, big trends for 2026.
So I thought that was a provocative set of questions that you asked me. Obviously, we are always kind of digging around in the data sets and trying to figure out what's the next thing that people are going to be talking about and how we can talk about it. I think there are two things that are happening right now or starting to happen, which I think are going to continue to happen into 2026, but we're only starting to feel their impact now. And one of them I think is a good sign, and one of them I'm kind of worried about. So the first one is the worrisome one, which is there's been a lot of chat about secondaries, but most of that chat about secondaries has been, hey, these funds are trying to either get out earlier, or it's concentrated in really, really late stage names, and it's big trades from, It feels like Stripe, for instance, has an annual tender offer where there's comings and goings on that cap table. What is missing from that is a discussion of founder secondaries. And founder secondaries in our data have really started to peak up. Now, it's not a huge percentage of people, right? We're still talking about single-digit percentage of founders. But even so, from the baseline, it is up quite a lot in 2025 versus 2024. And I think it's going to start really ramping in 2026. And then the worrisome part is sometimes it's at pretty early companies.
Oh, what are you talking?
Like
Series A?
Seed A, like that stuff is happening. And, sometimes it's for $10,000 and I'm just like, I don't know what happened there, whatever. Sometimes it's for really sizable amounts of money, 7 figures. And so to me, and I wonder if you agree here, that is a bubble sign. That is like, that is as close as you can get to like capital is chasing consensus too much. And therefore smart founders are kind of just taking advantage of it and getting stuff off the table. So that to me strikes me as, maybe there's a little bit of a top here coming, which is pretty rough. So that's the worrisome trend number one. Maybe it's great. Maybe I'm totally wrong about thinking that's worrisome. Maybe that's awesome and it's just going to become a normal part of life. I still think seed is too early.
I think seed is early too. What would be the generous attribution as to why people are doing so?
I mean, the really, I guess you could frame it as generosity from the founder perspective in that our company is in such high demand that we want to make sure more people than would normally get access to this company are getting access to that. And as such, I'm willing to actually sell some of my own ownership. But that framing is generous to the point of naivete.
Yeah.
It's
that
really like
feel grounded on the fundamentals. Like, because if you are, especially at the seed stage, to be fair, right? Like this is such a, like people still have to squint, to use the terminology that Adam Marchik once brought up in our interviews. People still have to squint in order to determine if this is a good company or not. And so if you were...
I don't think you can squint. I think everyone's running around with blinders on. Like you have no idea.
That's true.
It's like, who knows?
The rave glasses.
Exactly. Yes. Sold
music
by
festivals.
State of Glow back in the day. That's trend number one. Trend number two, and this is, I think, the good one, the interesting one for me is, everyone over the last 18 months has done the thing that we always do in venture, which is we like kind of go back on what we were saying before. So 2021 hits, and then 2022, and then there was a decrease in funding. And after the decrease in funding, there was all this was like, San Francisco is dead. Like startups now, we're looking for the next Silicon Valley, blah, blah, blah. That has not happened. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. It's never going away. You're not going to beat it. But the trend that people don't often talk about nearly enough is everywhere else, yes, there was a downturn, but it's just like the crypto markets. It went down, but it didn't go back down to the level it was before. It's at a much higher level in so many different cities across the US. So like you can raise a decent seed round in probably 15 US cities, which is 10 more US cities than you used to be able to raise a decent sized seed round in over the last, call it 6 years. And that, I think that geographical dispersion is here to stay. And that's really cool. I'm pumped about the fact that you don't have to be an SF in order to tap into venture, but you also probably are going to get a different valuation, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, the early stages, valuation is really not a good indicator of the true value of your company. It's just a bet that people have on the future potential of your company. And so you don't need the highest valuation from day one. And it's actually better not to, because then the higher your valuation, the higher the expectations.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Peter, this is... I love our conversation so much. We could go on and on forever. Thank you so much. And I love that you ended this podcast on a positive note of what to look forward to in 2026. It's a great holiday special. Thank you for being on.
Deeply appreciate it, David. Until next time.
Until next time. All right. Superclusters fans, happy holidays.
I love the research.
Hey, Superclusters fans, happy holidays. You made it past the snap, you didn't disappear yet, so I have a mini message for you. If you enjoyed today's holiday episode with Peter, if I might be so bold, I have 2 favors to ask of you before you go back to your holiday turkeys and sledding down slopes of fresh powder. There's one big red subscribe button right here. If you're on YouTube, if you liked what you heard today, that's the holiday cheer for the podcast. And that truly is filling the stockings for us. And I promise you, we will do our best that you get your most profound questions answered by the most experienced allocators. And if you want more of what you heard from Peter today, that's the magic button. 2, I know every single one of you knows something that I don't and has a question that I've never thought to ever ask before. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and curiosities down in the comments, so the next time you tune in, you hear the answers to the questions that you would like to know. I promised myself I'd record 100 episodes of Supercluster, so every comment, question, review helps me make this experience more meaningful and helpful to you and makes investing in venture a little less scary and a lot more friendly. And lastly, I want to share a quick disclaimer. The views expressed here in this podcast are for information and educational purposes only and are solely the views of myself and the guest alone. They are not representative of any organization that we are a part of. None of the views expressed here constitute legal, investment, business, or tax advice. Any allusions or references to funds and companies are for illustrative purposes only and should not be relied upon as investment recommendations. Consult a professional investment advisor prior to making any investment decisions. So that's it from me. If you want more of this left video is something we think you'll also like, and this right one is the latest one if you haven't seen it yet.